In the old days, they diluted the metal or clipped the coins. Today, unfortunately, it is done by merely printing money, and this is the reason we have to address this subject, and we cannot get our freedoms back if we do not come down and understand that no longer should we have this Federal Reserve System printing worthless currency. We're in the midst now of a currency crisis. Most Americans know something about it, but they have not felt the full brunt of what happens when the money is destroyed. Eventually what happens is you have rampant inflation, high interest rates, and a weak economy. This, right now, a lot of us understand, and a lot of Americans understand, that the economy is not nearly as robust as our government would like to tell us. They tell us there's no inflation. Can you believe that? That is preposterous. Prices are soaring as a consequence of our foreign policy. You know, they said we had to go to the Middle East to protect our oil. I don't know how it ever became our oil. But we went into Iraq. Oil was $27 a barrel. Now it's $100 a barrel and rising. So if we ever want to get back to a sensible policy, economic policy, we have to stop the inflation. Inflation pushes it up. The foreign policy just aggravates the situation and pushes prices up as well. Today, there's a risk premium built in. Sometimes I worry that in anticipating when those bombs might fall on Iran, I look at the oil market. Because the higher the price go, maybe what some traders are doing is they're bidding and they're betting that the bombing is coming soon. So, can you imagine how wonderful it would be to have a president would say, no more, we're not going to bomb Iran. A commander-in-chief has the authority to deal with the military. There's no reason why we have to have our Navy at the borders and the boundaries of the Iranians and threatening them if they don't do as we tell them, we'll bomb them. That is unnecessary. Unfortunately, we live in an age, and it's been going on, not with this administration alone, but many administrations. Our policies have been this. Either tell other countries what to do and do what we say. If not, we'll bomb you. And then, if you do what we say, we subsidize them. It's insane. What we need to do is say what the Founding Fathers said. Friendship with all nations, trade with all nations, no entangling alliances, and stay out of their internal affairs. There are some that would charge us with saying, well, that doesn't sound patriotic to do that. But you know, isn't it strange that they try to accuse us of saying that if you don't support this perpetual policy that is getting nowhere, that you don't support the troops? Why is it then that our campaign gets the most money from the troops? The financial crisis that we face is indeed connected with our foreign policy. It's also connected with runaway spending here at home. It occurs because we as a people have lost our way in assuming responsibility for ourselves and assuming and understanding that freedom really works. It does. But for too long, we have accepted the notion that the government is to be a nanny state. But what we need to do is get our confidence back, get the government out of our lives and out of our pocketbook. My personal belief is that our lives and our liberties come to us in a natural natural, in a God-given way, and I think that is very important. And that means that if it's truly our lives and our liberty to do what we want, then the fruits of our labor should belong to us entirely. Now, the natural consequence of that would mean that the tax system would not be complex. We would not have an income tax. I'm asked so often, by the media, they say, oh, yeah, it'd be nice not to have an income tax. Yeah, and then they always say, what are you going to replace it with? You know what we want to replace it with? Money! We don't need it. The country existed up until 1913, and we did rather well. Economic growth was fine. We had our faults and our problems, but economic growth was found. The CPI, as measured at that time, was steady. Prices didn't go up under the gold standard. So all of a sudden now, since we have had those new inventions of 1913, 1913 was not a very good year. It was an unlucky year for us. Not only did we have the IRS come in, but we had the Federal Reserve come in, and then, of course, during that decade, we had the change in our foreign policy. Remember the grand slogan of Wilson? He was to make the world safe for democracy, and look at how unsafe and how non-democratic the world is. But one night I was on one of the major TV shows, at least they think they're major, and I'm not going to name the show. And in answering one of the questions, I wanted to talk about the Middle East in lieu of history. So I said, we have to look at history of the First World War because the problems back there led to the Second World War and such a thing. And they said, don't get into this history stuff. We're not interested in history. But indeed, history is very important. Since we embarked on this noble so-called goal to make the world safe for democracy, think of this unnecessary in entering into the World War I, how much trouble it has led to. The Versailles Treaty is one of our biggest problems we're dealing with today because it was under the Versailles Treaty that we created. The West created this artificial country called Iraq. So it's time for us to leave, get out of the way, and let the Iraqis decide what kind of government they really want. One of the arguments always posed to me about that is, don't we have a moral obligation? We blew up their country. Don't we have to rebuild it? And I said, there is some moral obligation to that. And I think those responsible for the war should pay. All the neocons should pay. But as badly as I feel about what has happened to that country and all the refugees, 2 million leaving and all over the country, they're just, it's really a tragic set of circumstances. But the implication is that I'm supposed to support a position that I should further tax you to rebuild Iraq. I don't agree with that. But it can be summarized rather easily. The American people, we're all taxed to buy bombs, pursue this foreign policy that makes no sense. We go over and blow up a country, then they come back and they tax us to rebuild the country. It's easier to get rebuilding funds, which usually get corrupted and misused, more easily to get funds for a project in Iraq. And what happens here in this country, our levees are falling down and our bridges are falling down. We need to spend the money here at home.